our viewers and those who have joined us, Dr. Babatunde Ajibade SAN is the managing partner of SPA Ajibade & Co., a leading corporate and commercial law firm within Lagos, with offices in Lagos, Ibadan, and Abuja, Nigeria. He's a member of several committees and a lot of setups to ensure that the legal system is working. I'd like to put in summary, he has delivered papers extensively. He is a dispute resolution specialist and has substantial expertise in international commercial arbitration. So much to say about the Leonard Silk, but here you have him right in front of you, answering all of the questions that you have sent. Thank you very much once again for joining us, Leonard Silk.
My pleasure, dear. Yeah, Ms. Badru, I said my pleasure. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy for the opportunity to interface with you guys and with all the attendees. And I look forward to a very interesting and interactive session.
I apologize, Leonard Silk. Thank you very much. I'll go straight into the questions that we have received. Some have come in from Lagos, some from Osogbo, some from Abuja and Uyo, just across Nigeria. The first and the most occurring question that we have here is regarding remuneration and just wages for legal practitioners, especially the young ones. They are bothered about the current state of how much young lawyers, the new wigs particularly, earn, and how it seems like it's not enough to cater for what's going on in the economy. So they want to know if you have any plans to adjust that. Firstly, they want to know if you find that as a problem. They also want to know if you have any plans to address the situation, and what are these plans, if any?
Thank you. I'm not surprised that is the first question and the one that's most recurrent. I've found that in my journey since I embarked on this aspiration. Yeah, that is what concerns young lawyers the most, and not without good reason. So definitely, it's something that I would like to deal with. But it is not an easy problem to address, and I don't want to. It would be dishonest of me to say, oh yes, I'm going to address the issue of the poor pay that young lawyers get, and I have a magic wand that I'm going to wave. So what do I think the solution to the problem is? What I've said to everybody who would care to listen is that the poor remuneration that young lawyers get has to be put in context. It's what you generally describe as a welfare issue. So, it's a significant problem with welfare. And I think it is a subset of a larger problem of welfare within the profession as a whole. I think we have a significant challenge with welfare in the Nigerian legal profession at the moment. And I think we need to segment the problem. Whilst there is a significant number, or where there are some lawyers who exploit young lawyers by paying them inadequately, and that is a problem that has to be dealt with. I think there is a larger problem that there aren't actually enough lawyers who can pay young lawyers what you and I would like young lawyers to earn. But, these are different aspects of a problem, and we don't actually have the statistics to determine which is which. We don't know which lawyers are exploiting young lawyers who can afford to pay them more but are choosing to pay them a pittance. We don't know which lawyers are actually themselves struggling to put food on the table, so much so that they can't actually afford to pay young lawyers. So my view is that the first thing we must do to address this problem properly, to tackle it rather than just sound bites, is to find out what exactly is the situation in the legal profession in Nigeria in relation to pay. And this will also give us the information we need, because the situation in Lagos is definitely not going to be the same as the situation in Otukpo or in Ikotekpene or in places outside of the metropolitan areas. So I think it's important that we get this information, crunch these figures, and also do a comparison. Because, when I've engaged with young lawyers all around the country since I embarked on this aspiration, they draw, again, natural comparisons. They say, well, look, when we were in university, we had colleagues who were studying medicine. And when they came out of med school, they were guaranteed a particular basic income by the agitation by the Nigerian Medical Association. How come the Nigerian Bar Association can't do the same for us? And I tried to explain that, medical students coming out of med school and going for their housemanship, typically they're working in a university teaching hospital or in a government-owned hospital. So effectively, you have one employer that the Nigerian Medical Association can engage with. I mean, just yesterday on the news, we heard that the Nigerian Medical Association is calling some doctors to go out on strike because they all work for the same employer in government. Some of us are working in private practice. Some of us are working in banks. Some of us are working in corporate institutions. So it is not so easy for the NBA to engage on behalf of all lawyers and say we're negotiating a wage. But that is not to say that the NBA is helpless. So my view is that the starting point is let's get those statistics so that we know exactly how bad the problem is. Once we have those statistics, I believe that the NBA has an obligation to make a recommendation. It might sound like semantics, whether you call it minimum wage or you call it a wage recommendation. I would rather use recommendation because I don't think that we should promise something that we know we don't have the capacity to enforce. If the NBA says that it is imposing a minimum wage, I don't think the NBA has the capacity to enforce it or to ensure that all lawyers will get paid whatever it recommends. So I would call it a recommendation. And then I think that once we have those figures and we make those recommendations, the NBA has to devise persuasive means of ensuring that lawyers are paid what it recommends. It's not going to be something that you can impose. Because like I said, a lot of lawyers will tell you that, well, you can force a horse to the water, but you can't force it to drink. Those lawyers who actually can't afford, who truly can't afford whatever we recommend, will not be able to pay it anyway. So what I suggest, or what I think that we should do, and what I would propose if I'm NBA president, is that we should impose certain incentives. There's so many things that lawyers want to do that they need the NBA for. You want to become a notary public, the NBA has to give you its seal of approval. You want to become a senior advocate, the NBA must give you a seal of approval. You want to become a judge. Even some embassies, if you're a lawyer and you want a visa, you're going to have to, get something from the NBA that says you're in good standing. Now, my view is that we should aggregate all those instances in which the NBA has leverage and insist that those lawyers who are not meeting the NBA recommendation in terms of pay to juniors working with them will not receive the NBA's approval. Now, that is one way in which I believe that we can effectively push everybody in the right direction. And just to be clear, the remuneration is not just about young lawyers working in law firms, because not all lawyers are in private practice. We also have to one of the NBA doesn't pay any attention to their own concerns. Those are things that I believe that the NBA ought to take on board because they're lawyers as well. They also pay practicing fees. They also pay branch dues. Ditto lawyers who work in industry. I've also heard complaints by lawyers who work in banks, for example, to say that, when they go in at entry level with their colleagues from other disciplines, they find that those of them in the legal department, they hit the glass ceiling very quickly. Whereas their colleagues that they go in together who may have studied, economics, accounting, English, whatever, rise further through the ranks. So the NBA really has to find a way of making sure that it is addressing the remuneration, the welfare concerns, not just of lawyers in private practice in law firms, but lawyers right across board. And that's what I think we should do and get the statistics that will tell us what are people earning and what are firms also earning, because we need to be able to assess the capacity of the firms to actually pay whatever it's we recommend at the end of the day.
Thank you very much, Leonard Silk. That was very clear.
Hello, Ms.
And
Babu.
Yes, sir. I
Hello,
can hear you.
Yewande?
Can you hear? Can you hear me, sir?
Hello?
Hello. I'm with you. I can hear
Yes, I
you.
can.
Can you hear me, sir? Okay, I can see you now, Leonard Silk, and I'm with you. But I'd like to confirm firstly that you can hear me if you can.
Yes, I can. I lost you for a few seconds. But
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. I very much appreciate the honesty, and I think that viewers who are watching and listening to us from their houses or office appreciate the fact that you were honest about the question and how the process may take a while and a lot of strategizing to eventually bring some results. But a follow-up question to that is some lawyers are bothered about what they've been seeing in the media. So young lawyers particularly keep we constantly find them on social media and on other platforms soliciting for funds. And what they are asking to use these funds for are most times necessities, things like health care, things like, just essentials, just daily essentials. And so someone has asked if the MBA can provide, if it's possible to have a system established by the MBA that sort of provides a loan system just for the sake of this conversation, or something that will help people who are really in need but in the legal profession. And the reason they have said the reason this person asked this question, he wrote along, is that he's bothered that we are slowly losing the title that we have as a noble profession. He's bothered that people no longer give us the respect that we once had. He's bothered that it's becoming history with time. So he'd like to hear, and some other people actually did send questions related to that. So if they just want to know if you have any plans in that regard, or if you haven't seen any of those situations.
No, I have you, Andy, and I think that is such a good question. And I'd like to address that from two perspectives. One, as you're aware, we just gone through, or we're still going through, a peculiar situation world over, and it has affected everybody in the world. But it has clearly affected the legal profession in a particularly vicious way, because the nature of our practice, at least for the majority of our lawyers, is so heavily dependent on our ability to work from day to day. I mean, that is something that we need to address. We need to find a way of changing it. But the weakness of that system has been brought to the fore. I mean, especially in the regions. Let's not focus on the cities. But in the regions, a lot of lawyers survive based on their appearance fees, those lawyers who are in litigation. So if the courts are shut and they can't go to court, then they actually cannot earn, they cannot generate any money to feed their families. So, and this is what gave rise to the question of, palliatives, etc. So that problem arose. Nobody anticipated COVID. Nobody anticipated the pandemic. But what it says to me is that perhaps we should have been better prepared. And this is, again, for me, it's not a young lawyer problem. We have young lawyers, we have elderly lawyers. We have elderly lawyers who are disproportionately also affected by situations such as this. So what I think that we should do now, with the impact of COVID being so severe, is to ensure that this doesn't happen again. The NBA Constitution has provision for a standing welfare committee. And I know that the president has now constituted that committee, and that committee is looking specifically at the effect of COVID on the legal profession. But I think immediately we've resolved that immediate problem, or that pressing problem. I think that committee is probably one of the most important committees that the NBA has or should have, both at national and at branch levels. And what I would like to see is a situation in which we ensure that in the good times, because you need to think about the bad times when things are good and prepare for it, that in the good times, a proportion, and that's what I will be proposing if I'm elected NBA president, that a proportion of what all lawyers pay as practicing fees, as branch dues, should actually go into a sinking fund. that will be money set aside for the welfare needs of those of our colleagues who fall on hard times through no fault of their own. Now, that is the easy part. I mean, the easy part is to devise a means to set money aside. I think the really difficult part where we're all going to need to work together is to agree what is the criteria. Because, you know, welfare is something that you need to treat carefully so that it doesn't appear as if you're rewarding either somebody not making sufficient effort or pulling his or her weight. So we need to agree on what the criteria would be for being able to dip into this welfare fund. But I think it is important that we have that welfare fund in place to look after. And so, like I say, for me, it's not a young lawyer issue. It would affect young lawyers. It could affect a lawyer who is elderly or middle-aged, but who falls on hard times or is ill and doesn't have sufficient health insurance, etc. So I think that we must take care of the welfare of the legal professional a lot better, and this is one of the ways to do so.
Thank you very much for, again, answering our question, Leonard Silk. Another question which slightly follows up is the treatment, general treatment of lawyers, this time especially young lawyers in the profession. So we got series of feedbacks and some questions complaining firstly that young lawyers are maltreated in some offices. Some were saying that they don't have any healthcare provision, they don't have any some of their offices do not have a pension system working to protect them. Some of the offices don't pay tax for them, and a lot of other things which do not make the atmosphere conducive for good labor. And so they want to know if there are plans, if you have plans to, if you become president of the NBA, make the situation better and just regulate the general.
Thank you, and yes, I definitely do. What you described is, in my view, a pathetic situation. And it's not, I mean, I can say without any fear of contradiction that the firm that I have the privilege of managing ticks all those boxes. But then it's not really enough to say that, you know, at SP Ajibade & Co, we do A, B, C, D, and E. The question is, am I able to ensure that all law firms or all legal practices follow suit? And for me, it's a no-brainer because the truth is all this requires, most of them are statutory. And I don't see how we as lawyers can justify advising our clients. I mean, there's hardly any lawyer who at some point or the other has not handled a list, you know, therefore an employee or for an employer. Now, if we advise the employees that these are their rights, or we advise the employer that these are the employees' rights, how then do we justify not putting those same rights in place even within our own firms? So, for example, I mean, your obligation to deduct tax on a pay-as-you-earn basis is statutory. It's not optional. And if you deduct the tax and you don't remit it to the tax authorities, then that's criminal. It's not a civil obligation. That's criminal liability because that means you're taking money that is meant for government and putting it in your own pocket. The obligations to make a contribution towards the pensions of your staff and to deduct their own contributions from their pay is also statutory under the pension reform legislation. The obligation to provide health care, HMO, health insurance, these are all statutory obligations. So my view really is that the NBA has to put a system in place where law firms are given their marching orders in terms of the minimum standards that are expected of them in employing lawyers and in employing staff generally, because it's not just lawyers. All members of your staff are supposed to benefit from these statutory obligations. And that is what I intend to do. And it is all part, if I could just add, it is all part of a package. So, you know, my answer to the first question, I said that we need to get more information. We need to get more statistics. One of the first things I actually plan to do, if by God's grace I'm elected president, and I'm already working on it, is to develop a comprehensive questionnaire that is going to be delivered to as best as one can reach him, her, or it, to be delivered to every lawyer and every law firm in Nigeria, which will elicit all this information. You know, are you signed up with Pencom? Are you paying your taxes? What is the income the firm is generating? What salaries is the firm paying its staff? Some might not respond, but I expect, you know, especially when it comes to the issue of remuneration, if an employer says that he's paying his lawyers 250,000, the lawyers will also get a copy of the questionnaire. So the truth will come out somewhere in the mix. Because if the employer says he's paying 250,000 and the lawyers are actually getting 30,000, I think they'll have no incentive to support their employer in giving wrong information. So I think we need to have all this information and to know who is compliant and who is not.
Thank you very much, Leonard Silk. I very much agree. I also think, because I'm a lawyer as well, I also think that it's a very necessary thing to do, to gather statistics first, because it's true that we don't even know where the problem is. We know that the problem exists. We know that not every law firm is providing adequately and as they should be providing for their staff, but we just don't know where they are. And so I very much agree that there's a need to even gather information first. Thank you so much for, again, answering our questions. Some people are asking now, and we also actually gathered this before now, that they just want to know what inspired you to contest for this. They want to know why you want to become president of Nigerian Bar Association. Because there's some, I don't know where this spanned from, but rumor has it that you didn't want to contest and that somebody or some organization talked you into it or propelled you, something like that. So they want to know why you are coming out to be president of the Nigerian Bar Association.
So do I look like I'm kicking and screaming and saying, no, I don't want to do it, oh no.
No, you don't.
Okay.
Obviously, you don't. All of your answers have been very coherent so far. And so, I mean, you even look happy.
I do. And I'm very, very relaxed about this because, you know, and it's a question that even I have asked myself. And I'll tell you that without giving it conscious thought, I have actually been on this path for many, many years without knowing. And I don't want to start waxing theological, but I just think that there was actually something propelling me that I wasn't aware of. So, I mean, anybody who says, oh, somebody went and pulled Dr. Ajibade out of his comfort zone and said he should come and run for NBA president, clearly is somebody who hasn't been tracking what I've been doing over the years. As far back as 2008, at my instigation, SP Ajibade & Co, where I'm managing partner, has been running an annual business luncheon every year. We dedicate a significant amount of resources to this. Now, why did we start doing that? Like I said, it was my idea. I had to convince my partners that it was worthwhile because, you know, the money we spend doing that could easily have gone into our profit pool. So, you know, I had to convince them that, look, let's put something back in the profession. And if you look at the series of business luncheons that we've held, the last one was in November. They usually hold in November. Each of them has dealt with some aspect or the other of the challenges confronting our profession. So for me, there's no better evidence of the fact that I have a concern for the legal profession in Nigeria than the fact that I have invested time and resources in elucidating, you know, identifying these problems, getting people together in the profession to discuss it and to proffer solutions over a period of 12 years. And like I said, when I started doing this, it wasn't because, I mean, when I started doing this in 2008, it wasn't because I was planning that, oh, in 2020, I'm going to run to be NBA president. No, just because I just had a passion for the profession. Yeah, I just had a passion for the profession and felt that, you know, we need to try to do something about fixing the profession. But what has happened, and where perhaps there's some truth to what has been said, is that in more recent years, people have said to me that, look, your firm runs these programs. You talk about the problems of the profession. I mean, we've run some of our business luncheons talking about how to achieve judicial excellence. We've run some on how to eliminate delays in justice delivery. We've run some on discipline in the profession. Last year, the one we had was on the courts or the law enforcement agencies, the right venue for resolving civil disputes. So these are all topical and practical issues that confront us in our profession. And people have asked me in more recent years that, well, look, you keep talking about these problems and you're proffering solutions, but nothing is happening. The situation is not improving. So rather than just talking about the problem and talking about potential solutions, why don't you go there and try and fix the problem? Talk is cheap, but it's better you put yourself on the line rather than just talk. So that is the motivation. That is why I'm running for NBA president, is because I see clear, obvious problems in our profession that need resolving. And I think that I have the ideas to try to resolve them. And I want to offer myself for that purpose.
Thank you very much, Leonard Silk. There's also one question from LAWSAN. LAWSAN is Law Students Association of Nigeria. Yeah. They want to know if you have any plans to cater for them or give not paid attention to them for a long time. So they're asking, are there any plans for LAWSAN, or will any arise if you become president?
Definitely. That's a wonderful question. And, you know, for me, I think that it is true that perhaps the NBA has not paid sufficient attention to law students at the university level and to law students in the law school. I think the NBA has a role to play because obviously university level is the National Universities Commission that is fully in charge there. The NBA should get involved because we all went through law faculties. We should, I think that the system of legal education, I think that practicing lawyers should get involved at the earliest stage possible so that the students, as early as possible before law school, get some practical input and they're not just dealing with the theory. And then when you get to the law school, you have the Council of Legal Education. Again, the NBA is involved there because the NBA is represented on the Council of Legal Education. And the NBA must make significant input into the content of the law school curriculum and also into the actual training of the students. But, you know, for me, that should be part of a chain. And that chain culminates in when young law students actually become lawyers. I think that the NBA, at that point, you know, university, yes, we play some part in the NUC, in the law faculty, etc. Law school, we play some part in the CLE. But from the moment that young lawyers become qualified as lawyers, I think the NBA actually has an obligation to step in at that point in a big way and to assist young lawyers to provide them with guidance. Because what I find and what I think should be worrying to members of LAWSAN and to new wigs is that young lawyers come out and they just let loose. There's nobody, you know, assisting them, telling them, you know, these are the options available. No sort of career guidance. My view is that there's so much that lawyers are required to do in society, and that if we at the NBA are not helping to provide guidance to show lawyers what those options are in a systematic and structured manner, we're failing in our duty. And I'm of the persuasion that, you know, not every lawyer is going to end up or should even be aspiring to work in a law firm. And I think we need to provide this guidance from a very early stage. Some will go into civil society. Some will become human rights activists. And these are all important functions that lawyers must play in society. So, and that guidance needs to be provided because I think lawyers have different strengths. They have different areas of interest. They have different inclinations. So my advice or my recommendation really would be that the NBA under my leadership will pay a lot more attention to law students right from the university stage, but more importantly, we'll be waiting to provide them with guidance when they come out of university so that they can see all the options that are available to them in the profession.
Thank you very much, Leonard Silk. One other question that we have coming again is the fact that we seem to have 4 candidates who are qualified. We have 4 candidates who seem to be very qualified and up and doing. So they want to know how you are different from the other people and why you deserve to be the president of Nigerian Bar Association above them, or why you think you're better than them.
Okay. So, you know, just like you say, I think for anybody to step forward and say that he or she wants to be president of the Nigerian Bar Association, I would love to believe that it is out of a sense of commitment. And even just for making that commitment, I congratulate all of us that have stepped forward, because we could very well have just stayed in our comfort zones and not decided to do that. The reason why I think that I'm the best person for the job at the moment is because of my worldview. My worldview is that the greatest challenge confronting our profession today is that we are too divided. Our profession is divided along several lines. If you look at it from the point of view of our justice sector, I think one of the reasons why our justice sector is not working is because there's an unhealthy division between the bar and the bench. I think the bar and the bench ought to be working in a lot more closer collaboration. And I'm talking about positive type of collaboration, not the negative type. For positive collaboration to make the system work better. I think that there are necessary divisions between the commercial bar and the litigation, with both sides looking at each other with undue suspicion. I think there are divisions between the younger lawyers and the senior lawyers. I think there are divisions along ethnic lines, along religious lines. I think there are divisions between, the law officers who think that their interests are not adequately taken into consideration. Now, the reason why I think I'm the best person for the job is because my entire ethos is on how to unite the bar and make us stronger. Because I think that if we all come together and try as much as possible, it's never going to be possible for us to have 100% unanimity. But I think anybody who wants to lead the profession must have the need to unite the profession at the back of his or her mind as a primary requirement. Now, so not only is it my primary objective, but I think that I'm the one best suited to do that, because I'm a litigator. I'm a senior advocate of Nigeria. I practice litigation practically all my life. But then I also have extensive experience as a corporate practitioner, as a transactional lawyer. I used to be chairman of the Capital Market Solicitors Association. Even today, I still peep over the wall in our firm into the corporate finance and capital markets department when my advice is required and when my experience is required. On top of that, I'm an arbitrator. Now, as an arbitrator, that's the next closest thing to being a judge. So I also have a fair idea of what it takes to adjudicate. I have a fair idea of the burden that our judges are carrying, which a lot of people don't seem to realize. Indeed, I think a lot of our colleagues who aspire to go to the bench, thinking that this is the easier side of the profession. One of the reasons why I think our system is not working properly is because when they get there, they find out that this is actually a tougher job than being at the bar. Going to the bench is not a walk in the park. It is a hard job. So I have sufficient experience of all this, I think, to be able to bring everybody together, rally us around the commonalities, and get us to build a much stronger profession. That's why I think I'm the best person for the job.
Thank you very much, Leonard Silk. We have this question, also a very recurrent one. They want to know if you have any plans to make the judiciary independent again. So they're worried that it looks as though other arms of the government can interfere whenever they like and the judiciary just doesn't seem to have its strength and its independence as it should have. So they want to know if you have any plans to correct that or to uphold what is proper in that regard.
I definitely have plans to do that, but this is probably one of the greatest challenges we're confronted with at the moment. And just as I said at the beginning, there's no magic wand that anybody is going to wave now that's suddenly going to make our judiciary as independent as we would like it to be. Somebody asked me this before on another program or interview, and I said, what we must do right now, the first thing we must do is to fix the input. The input point is, for me, the quality of our judicial officers, because independence is not just something that you're granted. You have to have an independent spirit yourself. And if we don't fix the manner in which our judicial officers are being appointed in Nigeria at the moment, then the game is lost even before it started. Because if a judge is appointed because he or she has a godfather somewhere, be it a politician, be it a businessman who is influential, then that independence is not there right from the get-go. And we cannot get that independence if we don't ensure that the manner in which our judicial officers are appointed is based strictly on merit and is based on criteria that establish that these are people who are independent-minded. So that is the starting problem. And I'm not indicting all our existing or current judicial officers. I'm not saying that they're all lacking in independence, but I'm saying that because that input point, we haven't held the fence as well as we ought to there. That is why there is a significant lack of independence already in the system. But taking that as an aside, so I think we must fix the input point and make sure that going forward, the people who are appointed into the judiciary have that independence of spirit and independence of mind. But then how do we deal with those who are inside or who are already judges, who may, for some reason or the other, be lacking in independence? That's where issues such as financial autonomy for the judiciary come into play. This is something that we've been agitating for a long while, and it's something that, well, we've all heard the recent controversy in relation to the president's executive order number 10. Of course, there are significant concerns about whether that executive order ticks all the boxes of constitutionality, seen as we're in a constitutional democracy. But the intent behind it is clearly laudable. The fact is our judiciary should be financially independent. But on top of this, and you probably be able to tell that you set me off on one of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about. On top of this is, I think that there's a capacity issue within our judiciary, even in its ability to manage its independence. And I'll go back to our business luncheon series. I think about 4 or 5 years ago, the theme of one of our business luncheons was the administration of the courts and the administration of justice. The need to draw a distinction. The truth is that our judiciary is not functioning properly and is lacking in independence because our judges, with the greatest respect to them, are not trained for some of what they are trying to do. Remember, judges, after all, are lawyers, just like you and I. They're not trained in management. They're not trained in administration. I think that we need to separate the administration of the courts from the administration of justice. So when you talk about financial autonomy for the judiciary as a way of guaranteeing judicial independence, that presupposes that the budget for the judiciary, which it wants to have autonomy over, was properly drawn up. But I can assure you that that is not the case, because the judges themselves don't seem to have the skill sets to prepare a proper budget and a proper plan that is forward-looking, 5-10 years ahead, that provides for the judiciary. So I asked questions, for example, about maybe 10-12 years ago. The budget for the judiciary at federal level was being slashed because money was returned to the coffers of the government, money that had been allocated to the judiciary. And of course, the other arms of government, their view was that if you were allocated, 1 billion and you spent 600 million or 700 million and returned 300 million, that means you didn't need 1 billion. So your budget was then reduced to 700 million in the following year. Now, these are just arbitrary figures I'm picking. But the point I'm making is that we need to separate the administration of the courts from the administration of justice. I don't think that our judges have the capacity to manage and administer the judicial sector the way it ought to be managed. And this is where I think that the Nigerian Bar Association has to step in. And I think that the Nigerian Bar Association has to play a much more active role in managing our justice sector to give it the functionality that you and I would like to see.
Thank you very much, Leonard Silk. Another question that keeps coming, or that we have in stock here, is, so rumor has it that you have never occupied a position in the NBA. And so people are asking to know how you intend to blend in. Firstly, they want to know if you think that will be a problem, then they want to know why, or do you think it's a strength, and why? How do you intend also to blend into the organization?
I don't see it, thanks, Yewande. I don't see it as a strength, neither do I see it as a weakness. As I said, I've been involved in the NBA for many years. I don't think that involvement in the NBA is synonymous with holding office. I haven't held office as an elected official of the NBA, but I've participated in NBA offices and I've performed functions for the NBA, appointed functions over the years. I've been on the National Executive Committee for at least 4 years now. I've chaired committees of the NBA. I chaired the Law Week Planning Committee for my branch, the Lagos branch, in 2014. I chaired the Conference Planning Committee for the SBL in 2016, which was reputed to be one of the most successful SBL conferences ever. I currently sit as chairman of the Legal Practitioners Disciplinary Committee Panel B for Lagos. I've delivered on a countless number of papers at NBA conferences and seminars. I've been on the council of the NBA as a council member for 4 years. I was vice chairman of the Banking and Insolvency Committee of the NBA for about 4 or 6 years. I was chairman of the Capital Markets Solicitors Association. I was its pioneer secretary. I was also its vice chairman. So, I've had extensive experience with managing legal organizations, lawyer organizations. To that extent, I don't think that the fact that I haven't held elective office at branch or national level within the NBA is a minus. I think I have sufficient experience and understanding of the Nigerian legal profession to effectively manage the association.
Thank you very much, Leonard Silk. There's this other question about the free trade area agreement. So he says, how do you think you can position the Nigerian bar to be prepared and competitive upon the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, putting into consideration the effect of the implementation? I think this person is just trying to weigh, this person is coming from the angle of what it looks like we have now. How are we even going to be able to compete? And they just want to know if you have any plans in that regard.
No, I have significant plans in that regard. And I'll tell you, perhaps I should have mentioned this, an additional reason why I think that, even though it might sound immodest, why I think that I'll be extremely good for the NBA at the moment, especially in light of what you just said about the African Continental Free Trade Area. I'm currently vice chair of the International Bar Association's Africa Forum. And as you may know, the International Bar Association is the largest worldwide body of lawyers that exists. There's hardly, I don't believe there's any African country that is not represented at the IBA in terms of participation in the IBA's activities. And as vice chair of the Africa Regional Forum, I have access to colleagues right across the continent. And my view is that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is probably the best platform that we can use to integrate legal services on the continent. As you and I speak now, there are very few African law firms that even have the duration, let's talk less of the capacity, They even have the aspiration to be able to do work outside of their own geography. So, there are very few Nigerian law firms that are doing any business in Ghana or in Gambia or in Ivory Coast or even next door in Benin or in Cameroon. But what you find is a lot of the international law firms, they're taking advantage of that. I would say, I choose my words carefully. I won't say lack of exposure, but the absence of an international mindset. They're taking advantage of that and creaming off where the things that I think that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area provides us with an opportunity to do. I spoke about this at a previous webinar. And what I think that we must try to do is to get our African brothers to lower their barriers selectively. We're all naturally protective of our legal space. And as I said, I moderated an IBA webinar dealing with this precise question earlier this year. I think it was in February or March. What we need to do is to get our African brothers to selectively lower their barriers to entry, to make it easier for other African lawyers to work across the continent. Some might say that it is not fair to our European and North American and Asian colleagues. But this is not about fairness. This is about self-interest. I think the African Continental Free Trade Area provides us with the opportunity to first consolidate within the continent. And let's grow our practices, let's interact. And it might take a while. I'm not saying that, Nigerian law firms are suddenly going to start opening offices all over the continent. Maybe the starting point should be that we have correspondent relationships with law firms in other countries, so that when you have multinationals come in and they say that they don't want to deal with just Nigeria, they want to deal with, maybe they want to set up in about 10 African countries, you as a Nigerian lawyer can actually coordinate that on their behalf because you have contacts in each of those other African countries. We have to develop an international mindset. And I think that the African Continental Free Trade Area provides us with a platform to do so. And I think that because of my extensive international contacts and because of the offices I hold in the IBA, I will be able to ensure that the NBA is fully integrated into that process.
Thank you very much, sir. Another question that was directed at you particularly is the situation that we have now with the rule of law being respected by only people who seem to be the average and the poor. So they want to know if you have any plans to ensure that even the rich and persons in power, whether in the business sector or politics, will obey orders generally, whether it comes from the court or just maybe even statutory provision. They want to know how you intend to make sure that the rule of law is followed and obeyed to the letter.
The way in which I intend to do that is to ensure that our system works better. There's no way in which you can enforce the rule of law where you have a justice sector that doesn't work. When I've asked people, who are perhaps human rights activists or people who are commercial lawyers, when I talk to them about the need for us to fix our justice sector, quite a few of them think that, the justice sector is not really our problem. So your typical human rights lawyer would think that, the rule of law is his greatest challenge and human rights violations. And the commercial lawyer will think that, well, I'm a transactional lawyer. What's my business with whether the courts are working or not? But the truth is, the courts are the only place where you can vindicate all rights. And if the courts are not working, it affects everybody equally. The reason why the rich and powerful, as you've described them, or government, get away with what they get away with is because our justice sector is not functioning properly. If our justice sector was functioning properly, there's no way anybody would be able to get away with what they get away with. Because the rule of law presupposes that everybody is equal before the law. But then what kind of equality do you have before the law if you go to a court 10 times and 8 times out of 10, the court is not sitting? even if it's a fundamental human rights enforcement issue. You have to be able to see the judge for your matter to be heard. And you have to have a court system that will deliver a judgment within a reasonable period of time for you to be able to vindicate those rights. Or even for our transactional colleagues who think that, you know, the court system being dysfunctional doesn't affect them. So of course it affects them. Why would people want to come and do business in an environment where a simple dispute over ₦1 million could go all the way to the Supreme Court and stay in court for 12 years? So I think that one way of fixing, or one of the best ways of fixing the rule of law problem, is to get our justice sector to work properly. And it ties into everything else that I've said about, you know, the need to improve the quality of input in terms of the appointment of our judges. The need to improve the administration of our courts to make them more efficient, because that is where we're all going to end up. We're all going to end up vindicating our rights in these courts. You know, I was talking to somebody yesterday about lawyers whose rights are being trampled upon. Even lawyers, when even lawyers cannot protect their rights effectively. And you know, there's a clamor that the NBA is not doing enough. But I don't think that the NBA can actually do anything if we don't fix our justice sector, because the way for the NBA to vindicate people's rights is to vindicate those rights in court. So we need to get the courts to work properly. We need to get our judges to understand that this is the nature of the problem. We need to get them to deliver. I spoke in Calabar in January, I believe it was, at the Calabar NBA branch law week. And I was asked to come and speak at the...
I can no longer hear you, sir. Could it be a problem with network or any of our devices? Are you with me, doctor? I think your microphone is muted.
I think technology pulled a fast one on us again.
Also, I can hear you now, doctor.
Okay. So I was saying that when addressing the Bar Bench Forum at the Calabar branch all week, I recommended to their lordships that every time a matter comes before them that involves the infringement of the rights of a lawyer, especially infringement of the rights of a lawyer in the course of carrying out his duties as a lawyer, that these are matters that they should deal with, deal with as a matter of urgency, and also matters in which they should impose punitive damages in order to act as a deterrent. Because if we as lawyers cannot protect our own rights, then how do we protect the rights? How do we convince our clients that we're in a position to protect their rights? So for me, the enforcement of the rule of law, to answer your question in a nutshell, requires that we ensure that our system works and that we're able to deliver. Lawyers we can't go out on the streets as the courts. I must make sure that we're able to use the courts effectively and efficiently to deliver on the promise we make to our clients.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Maybe we'll take about 2 more questions and we'll round off. There's this question from Worry, and this person says, are there any legacies on ground that the NBA currently works with or runs with that you'd like to continue? Are you aware of any structure that they have created or they met and have continued in that you would like to continue or improve on?
Yes, there are. Well, yes, there are. I mean, that is a topical question. It's almost like I planted it because, one of the challenges I've seen also with the NBA is the fact that we have a 2-year tenure for an NBA president. And people have said that 2 years is quite a short period. I personally don't think that 2 years is too short. I think the problem is a significant lack of continuity in terms of policies. So this question touches directly on that point. I think that every NBA leadership, and it's not just about the president, it's about the entire leadership of the NBA, should, as a matter of policy, look to follow up or follow on whatever the preceding administration had started, which it considers to be positive. And I can pick up immediately on two projects that both the previous administration to the current one and the current administration have implemented or are implementing, which I would definitely want to sustain, which I think are critical to the NBA going forward. The first is that under the A.B. Mahmood administration, and I'm not even sure if this didn't predate A.B. Mahmood, but definitely it was more topical under him, is that there is a need for us to work assiduously to amend the legislation that currently regulates our profession. The legal profession is currently being regulated pursuant to the Legal Practitioners Act. The Legal Practitioners Act is 1962 legislation. It is ridiculous that we're still in 2020, we're still using that same legislation. Yes, it's been tinkered with here and there over the years, but in substance, that legislation is still what was enacted in 1962. A lot of the problems we're facing in our profession in terms of our self-regulation and discipline is because we're using archaic tools that were designed for a period when perhaps we had 1,000 lawyers in the whole country. We now have more than 100,000. You cannot regulate this profession effectively using that legislation. So that is a project that I know that the A.B. Mahmood administration started. I intend to engage actively to see it to a logical conclusion. We must find a way of amending that legislation and make it for purpose and make it more modern to address a lot of the issues you've raised. When we're talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area, we can't deal with this effectively under that legislation. We can't deal with the rights of entry, deal with the rights of reciprocity, whether we can get our Ghanaian brothers to practice here and whether we can practice effectively in Accra and right across the continent using that legislation. So that is one. The second is that the current administration, the Paul Usoro administration, has done a fantastic job, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of fixing the internal workings of the NBA itself. Prior to now, the perception, and I don't know that it was a wrong perception, but the perception was that the NBA was a cesspool of corruption. Now, the Paul Usoro administration has shown us that it's focused, and I've read Mr. Usoro's manifesto, and I realized from reading his manifesto that it's not happenstance that he's managed to do what he has done with fixing the internal workings of the NBA. This was actually one of the first things that he said in his manifesto that he was going to do. So he's walked the talk. And I think that that is something that must be improved upon, must be maintained for one, and must be improved upon. We must see the NBA not as a place where people go and make hay, but as an organization that is designed to look after and cater for the welfare of its members. So whatever we contribute towards that organization, whatever we pay in terms of branch dues and practicing fees, must be seen to be applied for our benefit. I mean, you and I were talking about establishing a standing welfare scheme. We're talking about improved guidance for young lawyers when they come out of the law school. These are the things that the resources of the NBA should be applied towards. And this is why I think that it is important to sustain that legacy of financial discipline, good internal corporate governance, better structure so that everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing and that they're doing it. So those are two things that I can pick up immediately that previous administrations have done and that I would, God willing, if I'm elected, definitely wish to sustain.
Thank you very much, Doctor. One final question before we call it a day or call it an interview is whether the NBA will continue, as it has done for quite a while, to represent only a sect, or if it will change, should you become president and represent the interest of everybody?
You, from everything I've said, I would love to believe that the answer to that question is clear, but for the sake of emphasis, I can assure you that one of my primary objectives, and which is why I spoke about the need, I said right at the beginning of this interview that one of the most important things that anybody who wants to lead the profession at this point in time must have at the back of his or her mind is that you cannot achieve much in the NBA now, in my view anyway, if you don't seek to unite the profession. And you cannot unite the profession if you allow the NBA to continue being seen as the preserve of one group or the other. And this is something that for me is so important that I think that it is worrisome that, and I don't want to, it is worrisome that whilst I'm clamoring for us to unite the profession, some would actually agitate for things that will further divide the profession. And I can't run away from it. The assertion that one particular class of lawyers feel that it is their right to be president of the NBA is divisive. It is unnecessarily divisive. I think that right now we should be looking to unite the profession, not to divide it even further. And I think that we should, engage our leaders on the basis of what they have to offer, not on the basis of what title they bear. It doesn't matter whether you're a senior advocate, outer advocate, whatever. It is your ideas that should determine who our leaders should be, not your rank. So definitely, I think that the NBA must represent everybody's interests. It must create a platform where everybody feels that they have a place at the table.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ajibade, for joining us on this interview. And thank you to everyone who joined us. Time is against us, and so we cannot answer all of the questions, but we have tried to put all of the questions together, and hopefully we've answered most of the questions that came in. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on this edition organized by the PALM. And we wish you the very best as you compete. And thank you finally once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you.